I always tell myself that if it can help at least one other person, then it's worth sharing. I just got done journaling about something and I started crying. I cried off all my mascara. I was wearing a tubing mascara and like my lashes are gone. But okay, so one of I this is something I feel like everybody can relate to at least at some point in their lives, is that they're a burden, or like they're asking for too much. Like they have to make themselves smaller or need less in order to get in the way less and not be a burden to other people. Growing up, I was neglected, and usually it's not that hard for me to talk about it, but I think it's really fresh right now, and I don't want to feel like I have to hide the way that it makes me feel, cuz I think sometimes we forget how serious it really is because we don't want to make it a big deal because we feel like it's a bad thing for people to worry. And there's this whole stigma around emotions, like the more emotional you are, then the less logical you are, and people take you less seriously when they see you cry because they think that emotions make you illogical. But really, it's just human. It's natural to feel sad about sad things. I think what's actually messed up is that within society, they teach us to be numb to it. We're so desensitized and so disconnected from our emotions and how we feel. Despite the fact that there's actual scientific proof, like research done on all of the things that the human body needs in order to function optimally. Yeah, despite all of the factors involved, like diet, health, exercise, whatever, society pushes this idea that if you are not capable of being a good worker and contributing to capitalism, that there's something wrong with you and that it's not the system. But tell me, like, it's proven that the human body needs all of these other things for our cells to function correctly. Like, you need a certain amount of fat, protein, and what is it, vitamins and everything for your body to function optimally. On top of that, you need what am I trying to say, you need exercise. It's proven like, oh, 30 minutes of exercise a day helps this or that. But also we know that there's also nuance within that, like some people need more or less, but they don't account for that. Society just says work 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, have your weekends off, that's when you get. But then that doesn't make sense. It doesn't provide a good balance because the amount of time that it takes to like plan out an exercise, get ready, shower, and even like prep a meal and everything, the average person cannot do that alone. It doesn't make any sense. That aside, I'm gonna come back to my original thing that I was trying to talk about, which was being a burden for needing things. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what I wrote here. So I said, so when you're neglected from a really young age, you learn to be independent, to need less. That's the way to do it, right? I said I felt like to need less was a good thing. I learned that to need more was a bad thing. To ask for anything felt like a sin. And I said, when I learned how to microwave my own meals on my tippy toes, I felt accomplished. But like now that I'm older and I see that image in my head of me microwaving my own meals after school, I I feel so bad for her. I felt so proud to be able to do it by myself because I knew that that would get a good reaction out of my parents. Like they had to worry about me less because it was a bad thing that they had to ever worry about me and care for me. That's how I felt. And I'm almost in my mid-20s now and I'm seeing my 8-year-old self and I am thinking you were too small and too innocent and too young to be doing these things by yourself and to feel proud of that. Like I should not have felt proud to need less. Why do we And so when I was 19, I was finally able to move out of my toxic household. And I ended up in another one. Luckily, like I had some family help me out along the way, but now I'm not in contact with them either because it was a step up, but it wasn't the most optimal place for me to be. I had worked my way out of that into this is me summarizing because this was a really big year in my life. I worked my way into my own apartment. I was taking care of all of my finances all by myself. I was completely independent. And at this point in my life, I was still I mean, I was gonna say figuring things out, but like the figuring things out never really ends, does it? But anyways, I got to a point where the reason why I was even able to move out when I was 19 is because I had let go of trying to please everybody else in my life. You know, there's kind of Stockholm syndrome that happens. It's like I know that they didn't treat me well, but it wasn't all bad, and like there's this whole process to work through. And it's really hard to do what's best for you whenever everybody else is going to judge you for it because you're doing less for them, and so they see it as you're the bad guy. I had to be okay with being seen as a bad guy and doing what I needed to do for myself. It took literally me getting the cops called on me and the police officers telling me that I had to take care of myself for me to finally stop trying to pick up everybody else's slack and pick up all these other responsibilities and just do what I needed to do for myself because I was severely depressed and anxious, and I knew that I wasn't going to last if I kept worrying about everybody else. I said if I can only save, like, I'm not going to be able to save everybody, I'm going to at least try to save myself. So, I mustered up everything I had in me and I moved out on my own. And from there, I feel like I had finally given myself permission to listen to my own needs, to recognize that what I wanted was not too much. And I started listening to my inner child. I started working on healing. Um, I started therapy, and I realized so many things about myself that made even more sense. And I got to a point where, and it's still a process because these things run so deep, you know? I got to a point where I was like, I'm allowed to want things, and that's okay. Like, I don't need to keep telling myself no. Because that was the thing. It's like I was like, there's no way that I can have that. But I'd be like, but this other person has it, so why can't I have that? I felt like I didn't deserve it, like I wasn't worthy, right? But in the past few years, my life has changed an insane amount. Like, I could not have predicted that my life would be where it is now. Like, I grew up neglected. I never had good role models around me. When people would say, like, who do you look up to? I didn't look up to anybody because what I saw was what I didn't want to be. I never had a life modeled for me that I thought was one that I wanted to have. I grew up with the idea of like, everybody's telling me that I should be so grateful. And I feel guilt that I'm not grateful, but I don't feel grateful because I feel like living is a burden. Because if this is all that there is to life, I don't want that. And then so I felt like something was wrong with me for not wanting what was presented around me. And, as I got older, I realized like that my world was so small. You know, that there were healthy relationships outside of the ones I had seen within my family. That, maybe the stuff that I read in books that wasn't entirely fake because I'm seeing other people have these things. So why can't I have that? And it felt ridiculous at first to believe that I could even have it, like to have a healthy relationship, to like have somebody who loves me and accepts me for me. I spent the first couple relationships I was in, I changed who I was to accommodate for what they needed. I changed myself to be who they needed. And then whenever I started like showing that I had other needs, then that was seen as a bad thing and I would hide that away. I was neglecting myself in a lot of the same ways that I was neglected before because I didn't know how to take care of myself. I had a horrible relationship with myself. I didn't believe that I deserved things. All of the things that I was told growing up about how I was stupid and I was a burden and like I was always too much. I talked too much, I was too emotional, I cried too much, I was clumsy and I would break things and I felt like I was constantly in the way. So all of that I tried to hide away. And I didn't know myself. I didn't know how to nurture myself, but I don't know what exactly happened. There came a point where I got so tired of it. I realized like I don't need to cater to anybody else. Somehow I got to a point where I believed that anybody that was worth staying in my life, I couldn't scare away. That I could be myself and I could attract the right people, and I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't scare away the right people. I could only scare away the wrong people. So I saw it more as like a filter. Like It's not my fault if anybody chooses to leave because they weren't meant for me anyway. And so I finally went out into the world with that perspective. And what really helped at this time is that I was diagnosed with ADHD and I had started therapy, and things made a lot more sense. I started to recognize that I didn't need to change, that I wasn't the problem, that the other people in my life, if they saw me as a problem, that's because they saw me as a problem. But that doesn't mean I was the problem. There's just incompatibility there. They were not meant to be part of my life, and I wasn't meant to be part of theirs. That's fine. That's the perspective I started to have. And so I go from like being like I grew up like neglected. I had like the bare minimum, right? Like I never had to worry about food, thankfully. And I had people in my life that made sure I was always clothed and fed and watched out for. Um I was lucky that I had enough family members that basically like took turns watching us and looking out. But anyways, I didn't have very much. I literally worked with the bare minimum. Like, I didn't even know that people decorated their rooms. Like, I would see it in the movies, but I thought that was just in the movies. I thought people exaggerated things in the movies. I didn't know that people had decoration in their room. I I remember Christmas, I would ask for like the bare minimum of things because I always heard them talk about the struggle with money. So they'd be like, "What do you want for Christmas?" I'd say nothing. My 16th birthday came around, they asked what I wanted. I had no friends because I didn't know how to make friends because I was socialized within this little tiny world that was toxic. So I didn't know how to make friends. Also, on top of that, neurodivergence, but that's a whole other topic. My 16th birthday, I literally said that I didn't want anything. When really I wanted things that I just felt like I would be a burden for asking for. I remember asking for, and if I did, then it was like the cheapest things, and it was really hard to tell them that I wanted anything because it would be shut down. It's like, "Oh, I want this." Well, that's too expensive. "Okay, well, can I have this?" "No." "Okay, well, then why are you even asking me?" "Why are you even, you know?" It's like you're not even trying to work with me here. Anyways, I remember crying, thinking like they couldn't read my mind. Like, yeah, I said that I didn't want a cake. I said that I didn't want anything for my birthday. And I really didn't get anything. I remember coming out of my room and nobody told me happy birthday, and I just felt like shit, like so unseen. Like I thought that I was going to be praised for not wanting anything, and I didn't even at least get that. It was ridiculous. I don't know what my point was there. What was I saying? So anyways, that's context as to how my childhood was, right? And I spent most of my time alone in my own head. I also have OCD. And when I speak to my therapist about this, about like my past things that I suspect are OCD, she's like, yeah, that was OCD. I had a really horrible time with my anxiety and depression and OCD when I was like 12, 13. Lived all that in my head, thought that I was going crazy by myself. That's how my life was. Like, I knew that I couldn't tell anybody because I'd heard the way that my parents spoke about mental health issues, especially when you grow up with immigrant parents. You know how they are. If you know, you know. Mental health doesn't exist. Like, you just need to suck it up. You're just too much. You need to change. You're the problem. That's what you're told. But then, come to being 19. No, hold on. At this point, I was 21, still living out on my own. Nobody believed that I could do it. They believed that I would be crawling back for help, especially because I originally moved out with a roommate. They told me that was going to go bad. I said, well, it might, but if it does, I'm just going to work with it because living with her will be better than living with you guys. And it was. And guess what? We did have problems, but what did I do with that? I got out of it. I was still able to make it out on my own, and I never went back. Everybody talked shit on me. They said they said that I was stupid, and they said that I wasn't going to be able to make it work. They thought I was in over my head and that I wasn't capable. So now, for once in my life, I am not being screamed at for just existing. I don't have to be on my tippy toes everywhere that I go. I don't have to worry about asking for anything because I'm independent at this point. I don't even have a boyfriend at this point. Like, I'm good. Though I'm really not. I'm like going through hell in my head. But even though I was still anxious and depressed, it was mild, very mild compared to how severe it was living my other life. And then I went into life finally. I was just like, and this was I was in a 2-year relationship, and almost 2 year, and I broke up with him because I was like, you know what? I realized that I had been now I know the term is masking. I was heavily masking with him, and I didn't even like him all that much. I realized that I enjoyed my own company more than I enjoyed his, and there was a lot of other reasons, but part of it was whenever I showed a little bit of my true self, he would be kind of judgy about it, and I realized I never felt free when I was with him. I always felt like I never thought that I could be in a relationship where I felt free. Anyways, I told myself that the life I wanted existed, and I went out into the world with the idea that it did. Like, and it didn't feel true. It felt like it was delusional, but I went with it anyway because I was like, I'd rather believe in this delusion and see if it's true than to live a life where I don't believe that it exists. Does that make sense? Because that life was so bleak. I was just like, let me at least convince myself and see if the life that I suspect, what am I trying to say? You know what I'm trying to say? Let me just see if what I want is out there. And so, yeah, I was like, whatever's meant for me will stay, and whatever's not for me, I'll just let it go. I started to like feel more detached, I guess. I looked into the law of detachment at this time too, and now I feel like I don't have to think too much about it. Kind of just like, anyways, I did that. And then I met somebody who I never would have anticipated. I had a list of things that, like, and I was like, I'm not gonna settle. I was like, I had a list of things, and I was like, if they don't meet these, I'm not even gonna give them a chance. And the first sign that they show that they don't meet these, they're out. And I ended up in a relationship with this person. At this point I was ready to be single because I was like, I'm going to be single, or this person or I'm going to find somebody who meets all of my criteria. I am not going to settle. That was my idea. And he proved to meet my criteria and even exceed it. Like, I'm telling you, there are things that I could not have ever imagined that I was like, like I got what I asked for and more. And so at this point in my life, I was just like, everything everybody told me, I was like, I was literally living a life that was against everything that everybody told me because I was told my whole life to play it safe, that you don't ask for too much. I was taught to settle. So living a life where I was doing anything but that, it felt almost wrong, but it also felt right because it felt authentic to me, even though it felt wrong because, like I said, part of me is still fighting like, well, everybody else told me this, but then I also think everybody that told me that, they're living a life that I don't want to live. So why should I care about what they think? They're not doing anything for me. They hardly are even showing that they care about me. And the things that I hear, that I'm not even talking to them, and the things that I hear them say through other people, they're talking shit about me. Why do I care what they think if they're talking shit about me? I don't need their validation. I am so much happier living life where they can believe all these horrible things about me, but I'm still waking up happier every day than they probably are because I'm not as miserable as they are. Because I can only assume that you're miserable if you're spending so much time thinking about me and talking about me and you haven't seen me in a year. You know what I mean? And so, whew. So now I live in I live in a duplex with my partner, who I am never too much for. Like, if it's not even just that, like, I feel accepted for who I am, but I also feel encouraged to be who I am. And throughout this amount of time that I've changed and gotten to know myself better and unmasked and just rediscovered the parts of who I was that got lost so long ago because I was told they were wrong, like, and all of the issues and things that come with it, I have people telling me that that's okay. That it's okay to be everything that I wanted to be. That I'm not too emotional. I'm not too much. If you need me at 2 a.m. because you're crying, I don't mind staying up with you and comforting you and listening to you and doing whatever you need me to do. I have friends now who I don't have to pretend to be anybody else for. Like, I. I spent my entire life fighting who I was, telling myself that I needed to change in order to be loved because who I was not lovable, that I was the problem. And I used to hate everything about myself. I remember looking at myself in the mirror, hating everything about my appearance. I couldn't even look at myself without sobbing and judging myself for everything and counting all the things that I wanted to change. And it wasn't just about my looks, it was about my personality. I hated how emotional I was. I spent my whole life trying to fight it, yet knowing that no matter how hard I tried to fight who I was, I couldn't change it. I remember being the child that was given like I broke so many electronics on accident, obviously. And I remember hating myself so much for how clumsy I was. My nicknames were Crybaby and Clumsy because I cried at everything. I was extremely sensitive. I am still extremely sensitive compared to all of my cousins and all of my siblings. And I was so clumsy. I would break things all the time. Like, whenever they got me anything new, like they had to replace my phones, they were like, you need to not break this one. And I would try my absolute best not to. And I would come home with shame telling them that I had dropped it in the bathroom the wrong way. Yes, I had the case on, but I somehow dropped it and it broke. I was walking and I tripped and I dropped my tablet. I was trying my absolute best to not, yet it was never enough. And it was just constant shame. Like, if you tried harder, then you could get out of this. If you tried harder to clean your room, I would be told that I was a liar constantly because I would go to my room, I would try to clean it, but I would get distracted, and the next thing I knew, my mom was home and my room was not clean. And I could not convince her that of the truth, that I got distracted, that I fully meant to have my room clean, but I got distracted. And I didn't understand that. I hated it because it was like I felt like if I just tried harder, that I could get out of it. But no, these issues I had so much shame about because I thought that everybody was like that and that there was something wrong with me simply because I I was the problem. And then so getting my ADHD diagnosis, that was crazy because then I was able to review my whole life and feel validated in my experiences and understand that my brain just works differently and that it's not about trying to fight it, it's about understanding it and working with it. And not just the ADHD part, but everything about me. It's like I don't need to fit the mold. I already know that I spent my whole life trying to fit the mold. I was a straight A student for the longest time. I started college technically early because I signed up for all the dual credit classes that I could my junior and senior year of high school, which meant that I got my high school credits and my college credits at the same time for those classes. So by the time I graduated, I think I had a semester's worth of credits already. I went straight into college and I had full intentions of being an engineer and going into some successful job, something that made good money. And obviously that didn't happen. I mean, I don't know if it's that obvious, but it didn't happen because I realized that it wasn't for me. I knew that I could keep pushing through it, but I was like, this is not me. It does not match me. I remember on my very last day of that class, I had a presentation and then for the first time we started talking in one of my engineering classes, with my classmates and my teachers. It was very casual in a way that we had never done. And everybody was basically like, yeah, maybe you aren't meant to be here. Because I had expressed that I wasn't going to keep doing engineering, that I was thinking about changing my major. And everybody basically just listed off everywhere else that I would probably be better. Because they were like, this is not for you. Like, it's very clear that you stick out like a sore thumb here. This is not for you. And I was like, you know what? Okay, that's fine. Because I don't want to be here anyway. Ugh. So, yeah, tangents. I don't want to apologize for anything. Part of me was tempted to say, like, oh, sorry, like, I have ADHD, and to, try to give you context so that you don't judge me for getting distracted or maybe being something that, or going a route that you didn't expect or being confusing or whatever. But this is how I am. This is how my brain works. This is how I express myself. And I tell myself if people have a problem with it, I'm just not for them, and that's okay. We're not compatible with everybody. And that's just how it is. And then I tell myself, the more authentic I am, then the more I'll find people who are the same way. Does that make sense? Like energy attracts like energy, you know? So yeah, I hope this helped in some way. Now I'm not sure what to caption this. Whenever I go into or like what to title this. Whenever I go into making a video, it never goes the way that I expect, but I've been doing my best to learn to go with the flow of things. Because when I'm too strict on myself, I get really, how do I say this? Start to lose sight of what I'm saying, and I don't really make that much sense. And it also, I get burnt out and it's not enjoyable. I guess because in a way that's masking. I just want to be who I am and have that be enough. And there's still a part of me that worries that it's too much, but there's also a part of me that knows that the life I have now, I would not have if it wasn't for me taking the chance and living it as if it does exist. Not sure how much sense that makes, but I hope I hope it made enough sense and that this helps some people. So, thank you for watching. Yeah. Bye.